In 1915, the Russian geologist Vladimir Bruchev wrote the science fiction book Plutonia. Slide, please. It follows an expedition of eccentrics to the Russian Arctic who stumble upon a strange depression in the tundra. As the group stumble through the thick fog that shrouds the inhospitable landscape, they feel themselves descending gradually into the belly of the earth. After a while, they glimpse what looks like grassy hillocks moving slowly in the distance. Initially attributing the sight to the strange land they have found themselves in, a glance through binoculars reveals the hillocks to be elephant-like creatures, or in a word, mammoths. The first instinct of the group is to shoot first and ask questions later, and their cull does indeed turn out to be a mammoth. And the encounter sets the scene for the rest of the book, which involves encountering and killing an array of prehistoric fauna, receding further into the bowels of geologic history the deeper they go. The final level of this hollow earth is a tribe of so-called savages, prehistoric humans that capture two of the party and hold them hostage, but the remaining explorers use their guns to terrorize the tribe and rescue their friends. The book follows a rather unoriginal format of dashing explorers using the logic of science to explain their surroundings, which is a trope frequently applied to the Arctic itself, whilst appropriating civilization onto the native population. And Plutonia does end on a glum note for its protagonists, and possibly a warning from Mabrucha for all would-be scientific explorers. Once the sea ice has melted and the group are able to sail away from the Arctic, they are captured by an Austrian warship who informs them that Russia has been at war with Germany for an entire year, and that they are now prisoners of war. They are able to convince the Austrians to let them go, but they lose all the specimens they had collected as proof of an inhabited hollow earth. Their scientific endeavors have come to naught, and nobody believes their tale. Slide, please. The story of Plutonia contains many layers and many intersecting narratives and histories. And despite the book's derivative structure and subject matter, it offers a fascinating insight into how a Russian scientist might have viewed the Arctic on the eve of a revolution as an almost empty barren land which offered a sterile laboratory for doing science and industrializing Russia. This understanding of the Arctic was carried forward as the Soviets pushed on with their plan to master the North, and central to this planet was the Earth itself, frozen soil known as permafrost, or Вечная мерзлота in Russian, and was subsumed into this narrative as something to be tamed, controlled, and conquered. And the budding Soviet discipline of permafrost science, of which Obruchev was a big part, was built on the idea that permafrost was stable, permafrost was permanent. Entire cities were built, huge mines were dug, new industries drew thousands of Russians eastwards and northwards. And Obruchev wrote in the introduction to Plutonia that he wished his novel to demonstrate how science has explained the successive transformations of our planet until, quote, among the animals a thinking being stood out, man, who became the owner of the earth, unquote. Slide, please. However, recent years have seen the permafrost beginning to thaw due to climate change, and those cities, roads, and industries built on permafrost are beginning to show signs of strain or collapsing altogether, like this building in Chersky in Yakutia. Thawing permafrost has the potential to be a global catastrophe and is already causing huge problems for those who make their homes in the Arctic. So can we truly say, as Obruchev did, that man is the owner of the Earth? Slide, please. A response to thawing permafrost has been a mitigation strategy that seems to come straight out of science fiction. In a remote corner of Arctic Yakutia, a unique project has been underway since the 1980s. This is the Pleistocene Park, and the father and son owners are attempting to address the potential catastrophic outcomes of permafrost thaw through ecosystem rewilding. Sergei Zimov, a geophysicist who set up the Northeast Science Station in 1977 in the Arctic town of Chersky, monitored shifts in the carbon cycle, methane fluxes, and paleoclimatic trends, and began to make the link between permafrost soils and carbon sequestration, which was something that had rarely been addressed in permafrost science before. As an experiment to prove his hypothesis, he cordoned off an area of nearby tundra to see what would happen to the permafrost if he began to restore the ecosystem that had once existed there thousands of years ago. Slide, please. Populated by megafauna such as mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses, this ecosystem looked very different to the tundra of today. Where now there are stunted larch trees, shrubs, and very low biodiversity, the Pleistocene landscape was a grassy steppe which supported and was supported by many forms of life, or as Sergei puts it, a vast Arctic savanna stretching across the entire Arctic. It is this landscape that Sergei, now with his son Nikita on board, is attempting to recreate, to restore the ecological benefits the ecosystem had on the permafrost, Gigantic beasts with a heavy, large tread trampled and compacted permafrost, keeping it frozen, and the light-colored grassland created an albedo effect that reflected much of the sun's hot glare back into the atmosphere. The Pleistocene Park has been slowly expanding its collection of animals and now hosts a variety of large herbivores, from musk oxen to wild horses, tasked with a weighty labor, to once again stop the permafrost from thawing and the carbon escaping into the atmosphere. But what is missing from the mammoth ecosystem is obviously the mammoth itself, but possibly not for long. Slide, please. The bodies of mammoths are found on the tundra in ever increasing numbers as permafrost thaws and have become the ultimate goal for the controversial new science of de-extinction. Slide, please. De-extinction or resurrection biology purports to bring extinct species back to life through gene technology, either through cloning or hybridization. And whilst Jurassic Park-style dinosaurs are beyond the capacity of de-extinction science, mammoths are not. Having lain in a permafrost grave for centuries, many mammoth bodies have been frozen in time, almost as if sleeping, with their DNA kept almost fully intact by the preservational properties of ice. Whilst the Pleistocene Park are not directly involved with mammoth de-extinction, they stake their claim to any successful resurrections by way of restoring the mammoth's former habitat and the tongue-in-cheek reference to pop culture's most notorious de-extinction project. Slide, please. Whilst the park is showing some encouraging signs regarding permafrost thaw mitigation, it is far from a fully working ecosystem replete with mammoth herds. Slide, please. And this is what the park looked like when I visited in 2018. So nothing like the picture I showed earlier. The park's aim, that is in their own words, to save the world, is one that works with an anthropocentric vision of mastering nature. And whilst the Zimovs take a hands-off approach, this is still a geoengineering strategy that favors humanity. But this vision must contend with other agencies that will not necessarily act as they are supposed to do. Mammoth de-extinction depends on science providing the conditions for creating life. But if it is successful, what might happen once this techno-mammoth is let loose? The animals in the park struggle with the weight of a brutal new climate and the expectation to produce a working ecosystem from the remains of an extinct one. But they might form new attachments with each other, break free from their status as planetary saviors, and create new natures. Slide, please. So what might these new natures look like? Matthew Trelew's short story, The Mammontagist Tale, offers a speculative glimpse of Pleistocene Park in a post-apocalyptic setting. We are not privy to what catastrophe happened exactly, but it appears that the planet now supports a tribe of nomadic hunter-gatherers who make references to the Texapian ape, the remnants of which betray a lost society based on technology and extraction, presumably the humans that exist today. The language is purposely abstract, the words often familiar and yet not, invoking the breakdown of the English language and its gradual piecing back together into something else, something uncanny. Mammoths saturate the story, and the made-up word of mammontagist, deriving from the Russian mamont, from descriptions of their extinction as beasts descending into ex-stinky holes to their de-extinction through nomagy and sequins. We learn that the tribe worships the mammoth by way of song and prayer, but now Mamont is dying yet again. The unnamed narrator, the titular mammontagist, relates the tale of their expedition to hunt down the surrogate mother, whose last known whereabouts was a place called Plastic Park. Inside Plastic Park are the remains of fences and paddocks, a reminder that Mamont and her kin were once enclosed to be gawked at by tourists and an overgrown tundra landscape. The mammontagist eventually reaches a derelict museum full of the usual exhibits and displays until they come across a curtain covering the sought-for surrogate mother, a techno-mammoth made from, quote, steel and spark, unquote, now rusted and crusted over with moss. For a while, the mammontagist is able to revive her, talk with her, learn from her. But when it comes to making the journey back to the tribe, she is unable to summon enough power to stand. The narrator is forced to leave her behind in Plastic Park and returns alone, imploring the rest of the group to travel back to the surrogate mother with him to fix her, and declaring they shall never domesticate or domesticate her like the Plastic Park have done. Slide, please. Trelew's story stands in almost direct opposition to Plutonia in that it offers a much bleaker, but also almost more hopeful future than that of Abruchev's. In the mammontagist tale, the human species appear to have been decimated, and we are left in no doubt that this was due to anthropogenic destruction and hubris, much of which is embodied in the rendering of Pleistocene/Plastic Park as a gaudy tourist attraction in the vein of its obvious comparison, Jurassic Park. Yet despite the emptiness of the park's paddocks and fields, the dying of the mammoths and the rusting over of the surrogate mother, the park offers a spark of hope that is found in the sprawling tundra amidst the undergrowth. The techno-mammoth lives, no longer forced to perform for her human masters, bound by fences, buttressed by commodification, her almost shattered form can be made anew. Her re-resurrection can make her world anew alongside other forms of life and non-life. And the point is not to advocate for some primitivist turn to a previous time, and certainly not to advocate for the demise of humanity. Rather, what Chalu's story offers is the chance to reimagine new worlds that are not bound to the yoke of capital, colonialism, nor techno-utopic fantasy. Slide, please. Both Plutonia and the Montage's Tale are science fiction stories that offer insights into different ways of thinking about and conceptualizing mammoths in the Russian Arctic. Plutonia describes a specifically historic Russian understanding of mammoths as objects of study, a dumb beast to be mastered or killed on the whim of the Arctic explorers. The Montage's Tale, by contrast, imagines a radically different Earth of the future, in which mammoth de-extinction has already occurred, but so has a devastating catastrophe that has seemingly wiped out most of humanity. Yet Chalu's story is not a completely pessimistic one. Rather, it imagines ways which the Earth and planet Earth can be responded to and engaged with differently. The Pleistocene Park sits at the intersection between these two stories, at once embedded within Russia's history and current Arctic strategy, but also orientated towards a future that uses resurrected mammoths to save the world. What the outcome will be as de-extinction science moves closer and closer to its goal remains to be seen. Regardless, if mammoths do roam the Earth once again, I argue it is important to pay attention to stories that might one day no longer be considered science fiction. Thank you.